Hey there, welcome. I'm here to help you relax tonight. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It really makes us feel like the global community it is. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our evening together. Story 3. The Man from the Midnight Bus. The 2:15 a.m. bus was a world of its own. A metal capsule filled with the city's shadows, night shift workers with thousand-yard stares, students nodding off over textbooks, and the occasional erratic soul muttering arguments with the air. I was a regular, my life temporarily reduced to the graveyard shift at a call center. The bus was my limbo, a rolling purgatory between a job I hated and an apartment that felt less like a home and more like a place to store my exhaustion. He got on at the same stop every night. Crestview Station, a poorly lit transfer point. The doors would hiss open, and he'd step into the fluorescent glow, always pausing for a moment to scan the passengers. He was unremarkable in every way. Average height, average build, a dark jacket, a baseball cap pulled low. He could have been anyone. That was what made him so effective. He always took the same seat, the one directly across the aisle from me, but one row forward, so he could turn his head just slightly and see me in his periphery. He never looked at me directly. Not at first. The first night, I thought nothing of it. The bus was half empty. It was a coincidence. The second night, a prickle of unease. The third night, a cold certainty settled in my gut. He was doing it on purpose. He never read a book, never looked at a phone, never listened to music. He just sat, perfectly still, hands resting on his knees, and he watched. Not the passing city, not the other passengers. Me. I tried changing seats. I moved to the very back. He didn't follow me. He just turned his head, a slow, deliberate motion, and continued his observation from a distance. The message was clear: your movements are irrelevant. I see you wherever you are. I tried getting off a stop early. He didn't follow. He just watched me through the grimy bus window as it pulled away, his expression unreadable in the shadows of his cap. The next night, he was there again, at Crestview, waiting. I told the bus driver, a large, tired-looking man named Frank. That guy's staring at me. I whispered, nodding toward the man. Frank glanced in the rearview mirror, then back at the road. Lady, half the people on this bus are staring at something only they can see. Just ignore him. I was on my own. The staring escalated. He began to mimic me. If I rubbed my tired eyes, he would rub his. If I shifted in my seat, he would shift in his. It was a subtle, grotesque parody. He was learning me, mapping my tells. Then, one night, he spoke. His voice was calm, neutral, devoid of any discernible accent or emotion. He didn't turn his head. He just spoke to the window in front of him, knowing I would hear. You look tired. The night shift is hard on the soul. It fractures it, lets the cold things in. I froze, my blood turning to ice. I didn't respond. I stared straight ahead, my heart hammering against my ribs. He continued, still addressing the glass. You take your coffee black. 2 sugars. You always sit on the right side. You have a small scar on your left thumb. You bite your lower lip when you're anxious. You're biting it now. A sob caught in my throat. He was right. I was. How? I breathed the word, too terrified to form a full sentence. Now he turned. Slowly. He looked at me directly for the first time. His eyes were a flat, dull brown. They held no malice, no curiosity. They were empty, like windows to a vacant room. I see you, he said, as if that explained everything. And then he turned back to face the front. The bus arrived at my stop. I stumbled off, my legs weak. I didn't look back. I ran the 2 blocks to my apartment, fumbling with my keys, expecting to feel a hand on my shoulder at any moment. The next night, I called in sick. I couldn't face the bus. I couldn't face him. I spent the day jumping at every noise, peering through the blinds at the street below. Nothing. The night after that, I had to go to work. I had no choice. I considered a taxi, but I couldn't afford it. The bus was my only option. I stood at the bus stop, my body tense with dread. The 2:15 bus rolled up, its brakes sighing. The doors opened. He wasn't on board. A wave of relief, so powerful it made me dizzy, washed over me. He was gone. It was over. I sank into a seat, almost giddy with the release of tension. The bus pulled away from the curb, and then I saw him. He was standing under the streetlight at Crestview Station, right where he always stood. But he wasn't waiting to get on. He was just standing there, watching the bus leave. And he was smiling. A small, cold, knowing smile. He raised one hand in a slow, deliberate wave. Not a friendly wave. A wave of dismissal. A wave that said, "I don't need to be on the bus to see you." The relief curdled into a terror far worse than before. The bus hadn't been his venue. It had been mine, and he was done with it. The bus continued its route, but the world outside the windows had changed. Every shadow now held his shape. Every reflection in the dark glass was a potential glimpse of his flat, empty eyes. His absence was a louder presence than his staring had ever been. That smile, that wave, they weren't a goodbye. They were a declaration. The rules had changed. I got off at my stop, my body moving on autopilot. I was hyper-aware of everything. The crunch of gravel under my feet, the distant wail of a siren, the cool night air on my skin. It all felt like a setup, a stage for whatever was coming next. My apartment building felt like a fortress under siege. I fumbled with the main door lock, my head on a swivel, scanning the empty street. Nothing. Silence. I rushed up the stairs, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the stairwell. I unlocked my apartment door, slammed it shut behind me, and engaged both the deadbolt and the chain lock. I leaned against the door, breathing heavily, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of my refrigerator. For 3 days, I lived in a state of heightened paranoia. I took Ubers to and from work, bankrupting myself. I barely slept. Every creak of the old building was him picking the lock. Every car that drove past too slowly was him circling. The man from the bus had vanished, but he had infected my life completely. His absence was the virus. On the 4th day, the email arrived. It was sent to my work address. The subject line was empty. The sender's address was a random string of numbers and letters. The body of the email contained a single sentence. "The view from your window is less interesting than the view from mine." Attached was a photograph. It was a picture, slightly blurry, taken through a window. My window. It showed my living room from the outside, taken at night. I was in the photo, sitting on my couch, staring at my phone. I was wearing the same clothes I'd worn 2 nights ago. He wasn't on the bus anymore. He was in my neighborhood. He was outside my home. A scream lodged itself in my throat, silent and choking. I spun around, staring at my own window. The blinds were open. The night outside was black, opaque. Anyone could be out there. He could be out there right now, phone in hand, taking another picture. I rushed over and yanked the blinds shut, my heart trying to claw its way out of my chest. I was shaking uncontrollably. This was beyond staring. This was a targeted campaign. But why? What did he want? The answer came an hour later, as I sat huddled on the floor in my darkened kitchen, too terrified to move. A new email. Same sender. "Don't be afraid. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to collect." Collect? Collect what? Everyone has a value. A worth. Yours is particularly high. Your attention. Your fear. It's a currency. And my employer pays very well for it. The emails weren't from a stalker. They were from a contractor. A psychic vampire hired to feed on my terror. The bus wasn't a chance encounter. It was a hunting ground. He'd chosen me. He'd studied me. And now he was harvesting. A 3rd email arrived. This one had an attachment named invoice.pdf. I opened it, my hands trembling so badly I could barely control the mouse. It was a mock-up of a professional invoice. At the top was a logo, a stylized, all-seeing eye. The client was listed as confidential. The description of services read, sustained psychological engagement and fear acquisition. Subject number 734. High yield. The total due was a staggering amount, listed in a currency I didn't recognize. At the bottom, in the notes section, it read, "Payment rendered upon completion of final phase. Initiation of direct environmental integration successful. Proceeding to conclusion. Final phase. Conclusion. The man from the midnight bus wasn't just watching me anymore. He was coming inside." The word conclusion echoed in my skull, a death knell. This wasn't a personal obsession. It was a transaction. My terror had a price tag, and this man, this thing, was a mere employee closing a deal. The impersonal nature of it was somehow more horrifying than if he'd been a lovesick stalker. I called the police. Again. This time, I had evidence. The emails. The photograph. A female officer came to my apartment. She was polite, took notes, examined the emails on my laptop. Her demeanor changed from professional concern to a barely concealed skepticism. "These emails are from an untraceable account," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "The photo, it's unsettling, but it doesn't prove who took it or from where. It could be from a neighbor's window, a drone. It could even be doctored." "You don't understand," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "He was on the bus every night. He said things. He knows things about me." "Ma'am," she said, closing her notebook with a soft sigh. "We hear a lot of these stories. The night shift, the isolation, it can make people see things, feel things. This could be a prank. A very sick prank, but a prank nonetheless. Have you considered talking to someone? A therapist?" She was dismissing me. She saw a hysterical woman, a paranoid mind fabricating a narrative. She didn't see the invoice from the all-seeing eye. She didn't feel the vacuum of his gaze. After she left, the silence in my apartment was absolute. And in that silence, a new sound began. A faint, rhythmic tick-tick-ticking. It was coming from inside the walls. It was the sound of a pipe expanding, I told myself. The building settling. But it had a pattern. 3 ticks. A pause. 2 ticks. A pause. 4 ticks. Like code. I pressed my ear to the wall. The sound was slightly louder. And then it stopped. A moment of silence. Then a new sound. A soft, wet, dragging sound. Like something heavy and damp being pulled across the floor of the apartment next door. But the apartment next door had been vacant for months. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife I owned. It was a pathetic defense against something that invoiced fear. I stood in the center of my living room, knife held out in front of me, turning in slow circles, waiting. My phone buzzed. A new email. I didn't want to look. I had to look. Phase 2. Auditory integration. The subject's stress indicators are spiking. Excellent yield. He wasn't just outside. He was in the building. He was in the walls. The ticking, the dragging, they were part of the show. Part of the collection process. The dragging sound stopped. Then, a knock on my door. Not a loud, aggressive knock. A polite, almost timid tap-tap-tap. I didn't move. I couldn't breathe. A voice spoke from the other side of the door. It was his voice. The same neutral, empty tone from the bus. "I know you're home. I can hear you breathing. Your respiratory rate is elevated. 28 breaths per minute. Indicative of high anxiety." He was monitoring my vitals. From the hallway. "I'm here to perform a quality assessment," he continued, his voice calm, professional. "I need to measure your pupillary response and dermal galvanic activity. It will only take a moment. Please open the door." This was it. The conclusion. The final assessment before his employer rendered payment. I backed away from the door toward my bedroom. There was a window there. A fire escape. It was 2 stories up. I could break the glass. I could try to run. "Running is not advised," his voice said, as if he could read my thoughts through the door. "The external environment is not secure. My employer has assets everywhere. It's easier if you cooperate. The data is cleaner." I reached my bedroom door just as I heard the sound of a key sliding into the deadbolt of my front door. A soft, metallic click. Then the sound of the chain lock being slowly, carefully slid out of its track. He had a key. Of course he had a key. He was a professional. The front door began to open. I slammed my bedroom door shut and locked it. A flimsy button lock that would barely slow down a determined child. It was a futile gesture, but my body was operating on primal instinct. I scrambled toward the window, my socks slipping on the hardwood floor. From the living room, I heard his footsteps. They were slow, measured, unhurried. He wasn't rushing. He had all the time in the world. He was a technician entering a lab. Tick, tick, tick. The sound started again, but now it was coming from the bedroom vent. A mocking, rhythmic reminder that he was already in the system. I fumbled with the window latch, my fingers numb with terror. It was old, painted shut in places. I grunted, pulling at it with all my strength. The footsteps stopped outside my bedroom door. A moment of silence. Then, a gentle knock. Tap, tap, tap. "Please," I sobbed, the word escaping in a choked gasp. I wasn't talking to him. I was talking to the universe, to God, to anyone who might be listening. "The window won't open," his voice stated through the door, matter of fact. "I sealed it shut from the outside last week. For your safety, and for data integrity. We can't have the subject attempting to elude assessment." Last week, he'd been in my apartment, while I slept. The thought was so violating, so utterly monstrous, that my legs gave way. I slid down the wall next to the window, the knife clattering to the floor beside me. I was hyperventilating, tears streaming down my face. There was no escape. There was no help coming. The doorknob turned slowly. The flimsy lock held for a second, then snapped with a sound like a tooth breaking. The door swung open. He stood in the doorway, backlit by the light from the living room. He looked exactly the same as he had on the bus. Average, unremarkable, dressed in dark clothing. In one hand, he held a small, sleek digital tablet. In the other, he held a bizarre, multi-pronged metallic device that looked like a cross between a spider and a heart monitor. His eyes were on the tablet, not on me. He was reading data. Subject is non-compliant. Adrenaline and cortisol levels are off the charts. Excellent. He made a note on the tablet with a stylus. Pupils are dilated. Good. Good. He took a step into the room, the strange device in his hand humming to life with a low, electronic whine. This will measure skin conductance. It's painless. Please hold still. Movement introduces noise into the data. He advanced toward me where I sat crumpled on the floor. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the cold touch of the metal, for whatever came next. But it didn't come. I heard him stop. I heard a soft, electronic chime from his tablet. He let out a small, disappointed sigh. Oh. I opened my eyes. He was staring at his tablet, a faint frown on his face. What? I whispered, the word a ragged tear in the fabric of the silence. You've peaked too early, he said, his tone clinical, slightly annoyed. The fear response is already beginning to habituate. The amygdala is fatiguing. You're becoming desensitized. The yield is dropping. He looked at me for the first time since entering the apartment, and for a fleeting second, I saw something in those flat eyes. Not malice, but professional frustration. I was failing his experiment. I was a subpar product. This is problematic, he muttered, more to himself than to me. The client expects a sustained, high-grade fear harvest. A crash like this, it's messy. It devalues the entire collection. He lowered the metallic device. The humming stopped. He tapped on his tablet for a moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, he looked back at me. The frustration was gone, replaced by a look of cold, efficient calculation. The current environment is compromised. The subject is acclimating. We need to reset the parameters. He made a final note on his tablet. Initiate Protocol Delta. Scrap the current collection. Prepare the subject for transfer to a new stimulus environment. He turned and walked out of the bedroom, already speaking into a small microphone on his collar. Logistics, this is Collector 7. Subject 734 is being prepared for transfer. The apartment is to be sanitized. All existing data is to be scrubbed. I need a clean slate. Something more potent. I heard the front door open and close. He was gone. I sat on the floor, trembling, trying to process what had just happened. I wasn't being let go. I was being reassigned. My value had dropped, so I was being moved to a new hell, a new set of horrors designed to restart the fear factory from scratch. The game wasn't over. The assessment had just begun, and I had, somehow, failed it. Page 5 of 5. Silence. The apartment was utterly, profoundly silent. The ticking had stopped. The dragging was gone. Even the normal nighttime sounds of the building seemed to have been muffled. It was the silence of a vacuum. The silence after a bomb has gone off, and before the screams begin. I don't know how long I sat there on the floor. Time had become meaningless. I was a product awaiting shipment. A lab rat being moved to a new maze. Slowly, mechanically, I pushed myself to my feet. My body felt heavy, foreign. I walked out of the bedroom and into the living room. Everything was exactly as I had left it. There was no sign of forced entry. The door was closed. The chain lock was back in place. It was as if he had never been here. As if it had all been a hallucination. But I knew it wasn't. The cold, clinical reality of it was burned into my mind. The invoice. The assessment. Protocol Delta. I was on the menu, and my current flavor was no longer satisfactory. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hand was steady. The hysterical terror was gone, replaced by a chilling, hollow dread. This was my life now. I was a resource to be mined. My fear was a crop to be harvested, and when the land went barren, they would simply move me to a new field. A light on my answering machine was blinking. I hadn't noticed it before. I never used the landline. I pressed play. A voice, synthesized, genderless, echoed in the quiet kitchen. Subject 734. Transfer initiated. Your new assignment awaits. A car will arrive at 4 o'clock. Please be ready. Compliance is appreciated. Resistance will be met with calibration. Thank you for your contribution. The message ended. The light stopped blinking. 4 o'clock, 2 hours from now. I looked around my apartment. The books on the shelf, the photos on the wall, the cheap furniture I'd assembled myself. It wasn't my home. It was a rental property, a temporary holding cell, and the lease was up. I didn't pack a bag. What was the point? They were providing a new stimulus environment. They would have everything I needed there, or nothing I needed. It didn't matter. I sat on the couch and waited. I watched the clock on the wall tick towards 4 a.m. Each tick was a second closer to an unknown horror, a professionally designed nightmare meant to optimize my terror output. At 3:55, headlights washed across my living room window. A large, black van with no markings had pulled up to the curb. Its engine was running, a low, patient purr. The passenger door opened. A figure got out. It was him, the collector. He was holding his tablet. He looked at my window, then down at his tablet, making a note. Assessing my readiness, he opened the side door of the van. The interior was dark. I stood up. My legs carried me to the front door. I disengaged the locks. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange, disembodied calm. This was the only choice left, the only path forward. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. The collector watched me, his expression unreadable. He gave a slight, professional nod and gestured toward the open door of the van. I walked toward it. I didn't look back at my apartment. I didn't look at the sleeping world around me. I climbed into the dark, spacious interior. The seats were comfortable, upholstered in a soft, gray fabric. The collector closed the door, plunging me into darkness. A moment later, the driver's side door opened and closed. The van pulled smoothly away from the curb. I sat in the dark, listening to the sound of the engine. There were no windows in the back. I had no idea where we were going. After a few minutes, a small screen mounted on the partition between the front and back seats flickered to life. It showed a single line of text, glowing white in the darkness. Welcome to Phase 3. We hope you enjoy the new stimuli. The screen went black, and then a new sound began to play through hidden speakers. It was the sound of a heartbeat, slow and steady at first, then beginning to race, faster and faster, pounding against the silence. It was my heartbeat. He was still monitoring it, and he was playing it back for me. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. The game was indeed still on. I had just been moved to a new board, and the first move was his.